Picture this. It's September 2022. Lebanon's in the middle of this crazy financial meltdown, right? And you've got people robbing banks.
Wild. Right.
But here's the thing. They're not after, like, bags of cash. They're trying to get their own money back. The banks basically froze their accounts.
Yeah.
It's kind of nuts, and we'll get into this in this deep dive into, like, all the whole history of money. It's kind of thing. It's happened before.
It's happened again and again. And it really highlights something we often overlook. The technology of money, sure, that's always evolving.
Right.
But the core issues, like trust, power struggles, the potential for, manipulation.
Always there.
Always there, since the very beginning.
Yeah, and to really dig into all this, we're using Lyn Alden's book.
Broken Money. Excellent read.
Broken Money. So we're going way back, to the very roots of money. I'm talking early systems, figuring out who had what, who traded what, who owed who. It all starts with the simple idea of a ledger, right?
Yeah, and, when people hear ledger, they think boring accounting spreadsheets. But this is way more fundamental. This is about the need to track value, even in the simplest economies.
Like, imagine you're in a small tribe and, I don't know, you're using shells for money.
Okay.
You're fishing all day just to get those shells right.
Makes sense.
And you need a way to track if, let's say, someone owes you a few shells for that fish you traded.
Yeah.
You can't carry all those shells around all the time.
Right. It'd be chaotic.
Yeah.
That's where this idea of a ledger comes in.
Okay.
Even in a simple tribe, they'd naturally create a way to keep track, like debts and credits. Let's say we've got two tribe members, Vito and Bobby, making a trade.
All right. Vito, Bobby, classic. What are they trading?
So Vito, he gives Bobby some fish.
Yeah.
Right? But Bobby, he doesn't have enough shells to pay right away. They need a way to record that.
Like a debt. So do they, carve it into a tree or something?
Something like that. Maybe it's a note on a stone, a piece of wood, saying, Bobby owes Vito 5 shells. That's their ledger. A record, simple, but it keeps things straight.
It's like a prehistoric IOU.
Exactly. Maintains trust, balance.
It's crazy to think something like, double entry bookkeeping, all that complex stuff we use today to track trillions of dollars. It all goes back to this.
Oh, absolutely.
Trying to keep track of who had which shells.
It's the foundation. And what Alden points out so well is that these systems, they naturally become more sophisticated. When Bobby gets those shells, pays Vito back, they don't just erase the debt, they add a new entry. Bobby paid. Double entry bookkeeping. Yeah. Every debit has a credit.
Even in this tribe, you see the seeds of, Wall Street, right? But instead of stocks, it's shells.
Exactly. And as societies get bigger, more complex, their money, the way they track it, well, that has to evolve too.
And Alden talks about commodity money. These are goods, right?
Yeah.
It uses money because they have value on their own. You're not just talking about numbers on a ledger now.
You're talking about tangible stuff, like those Yap Islanders. They use these giant stone discs as money. Ray stones, they call them.
Wait, giant stones? How did they roll them around to buy stuff?
That's the best part. They didn't. These stones were huge. Some weighed tons. Way too big to move. But everyone knew who owned which stone, even if it had been there for generations.
So it was all, mental.
The value was shared history, tradition, a mental ledger everyone kept up.
The whole island was like a living, breathing bank.
Shows you this idea, a decentralized system. It's not new.
Right.
No one's totally in control. And trust, shared knowledge, that's key.
But this commodity money, it wasn't always so, decentralized, right?
Right.
Alden mentions tobacco in colonial America. What happened there?
Tobacco, super practical back then. They grew tons of it, easy to divide up, and people always wanted it. Consistent demand.
Makes sense.
But even then, you see attempts to control the ledger. In this case, it was controlling how much tobacco was out there.
Oh, interesting. So playing with the supply.
Exactly. Colonial governments tried to keep the amount of tobacco just right so the price would stay stable.
Sounds familiar. The early days of, central banking and all that.
They realized, control the money, you have power. But if they're using stones and tobacco, how did gold become, the thing for so long?
It's pretty wild to think about, right? We went from using actual physical stuff like gold as money to just digital numbers on a screen.
It's a mind trip for sure.
How did that even happen?
Not overnight, that's for sure. Alden, she points to this thing, the Huala network, as this fascinating kind of bridge.
A bridge between old school gold coins and what we have now.
Exactly.
Okay, Huala. That sounds like something I'd order at a restaurant.
Right. Catchy name.
Not exactly a financial system. What is it?
So imagine this, right? You got to send money to someone, but it's the year 1500.
Okay. No Venmo back then.
No banks, no easy transfers. What do?
I'd probably just walk it over there myself, assuming they're not too far.
Not if you're sending gold across a desert.
Uh-huh.
But you could turn to a Hawala broker. Say you need to send, I don't know, 10 gold coins to your cousin.
Across the desert, yeah.
You give your coins to this local Hawala guy.
Okay.
He contacts another broker where your cousin IS. Boom, your cousin gets paid the equivalent, often like instantly, even though no gold physically moved.
It's like a chain of trust or something.
A network. Spans continents. They rely on each other, settle their debts periodically. It's brilliant, really.
That's way more efficient than I would have thought.
Centuries. This has been working.
More human scale than what we have now, for sure.
For sure. But economies got even more complex. Global trade exploded.
Right, so you needed something bigger.
That's where banks stepped in. They became those Hawala brokers, essentially, keeping track of everyone's money.
Okay, so when I deposit money at the bank now, it's not just sitting in a vault with my name on it, is it?
Not quite. Modern banking, it's built on this thing called fractional reserve banking.
Kitschy.
Ronery.
Not really, but okay. What's that mean?
Basically, they only keep a fraction of the deposits on hand. The rest, they lend it out.
Wait, so if I deposit $100, they might keep, like, $10 and lend out the other $90.
You got it.
But what if I want all my money back?
That's the gamble with this system.
Seems risky.
It works. As long as everyone doesn't try to get their money at the same time. Bank run, they call it.
Right, makes sense.
It's a balancing act.
Yeah.
Most people won't need their full amount all at once.
But this is how they loan money out to businesses, people buying houses, all that, right?
Exactly. Keeps the economy humming. But here's where it gets really wild. By doing this, lending and relending, they're creating new money.
Hold on. I thought only, like, the government could do that. Print more money, I mean.
Common thought. But with fractional reserve banking, commercial banks, they're in the money-creating business too.
Seriously, how?
Okay, so that $90 they lent out from your initial deposit, let's say someone else, your friend Mary, she borrows that.
Okay, Mary's got my $90, basically.
In a way. Now, Mary deposits that into her bank. Her bank can then lend out a chunk of that. See the ripple effect?
So more money is just appearing out of nowhere.
Not exactly nowhere. It's based on that initial deposit. But it multiplies.
So that original $10 I put in, that's the only real money, so to speak.
You're getting it. That's the reserve. Everything else is built on top.
Wow, okay. And this is all fine and good, I guess, until it's not, right?
It can be powerful, fueling growth, but also prone to wobbles.
And this is where it matters for regular people, like our listeners, right?
Absolutely. Alden talks about this, the Cantelon Effect. New money enters the system. It doesn't help everyone equally.
So some people benefit more than others.
Think about it. Those closest to where this new money's coming from, debtors, big corporations, government folks, they get to spend it first.
Before prices go up, right?
Exactly. By the time it trickles down to everyday folks, prices have risen. Their money doesn't go as far anymore.
So who loses out the most then?
Often, it's the people furthest from that money creation. Savers, people on fixed incomes, small businesses. Tough for them to keep up.
This reminds me of those bank runs in Lebanon we talked about. People couldn't even access their own money.
Exactly. The Cantelon Effect in action. The system, it can have real consequences.
Right. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It affects people's lives.
And the 2020 pandemic, oh, that was a textbook example.
How so?
Trillions pumped into the economy, right?
Right.
Stimulus checks, bailouts, the whole 9 yards.
Trying to prevent a total meltdown, yeah?
Absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
But it also made asset prices go haywire. Wealth inequality got worse.
Right. So even with good intentions, there can be downsides.
It's complex. And that's why understanding it all, how money's created, who benefits, it's so crucial.
It's like that saying, follow the money, right? You'll find the real story.
I'll nail it with that one.
So we've talked about the problems with the old money, and even gold has its issues. Is there a different way? Could Bitcoin, this whole digital gold thing, be the answer?
Okay, so we've gone from shells to gold to, banks practically making money appear out of thin air.
It's a wild ride through history, that's for sure.
It really is. But now it's the digital age, and we've got this whole other thing, Bitcoin. Could this be the answer we've been looking for?
It's definitely shaking things up. What's so interesting is Bitcoin comes along just as trust in those big systems, the ones we've been talking about.
Right. The banks, the governments.
Exactly. That trust is kind of shaky. People want alternatives, ways to control their own money, and Bitcoin. It taps right into that.
Right, and everyone's calling it digital gold these days. But before we go too far, what is Bitcoin really? At its heart, It's a digital currency, but decentralized. You're sending and receiving value online, but no middleman. No banks, no payment processors taking a cut.
So no more waiting for transfers to clear or paying those crazy fees.
Exactly. Sounds good, right?
It does, but how does that even work? Who's making sure it all runs smoothly if there's no one in charge?
That's where it gets really cool. Bitcoin uses this thing called a blockchain. Think of it like a digital ledger.
Okay, I'm picturing those old school ledger books again.
Kind of, but instead of being in one place, it's copied across a whole network of computers. Everywhere.
So, it's almost like those ray stones, right? Except instead of the whole island knowing.
It's a network of computers keeping track.
And if one computer goes down, it's not a big deal because all the others.
Have a copy. Exactly. No single point of failure. No one can just shut it down. And every Bitcoin transaction recorded on this blockchain, totally transparent.
I get that part, but how do you make sure it's secure? It's still just, information, right? Can't someone hack it?
That's the beauty of this whole thing. It's so spread out, this network, that hacking it, near impossible. You'd need to control, most of the computers on the network.
Good luck with that.
Seriously. And this security comes from something called proof of work.
Proof of work? What is that? I have to show up and prove I did something to get paid in Bitcoin.
Kind of. Imagine this massive digital Sudoku puzzle. Anyone can try to solve it.
Okay.
People all over, they use powerful computers, trying to be the first to crack the code.
So it's like a global competition.
You got it. And the winner, they get to add a new block of transactions to the blockchain. That's the mining part. And they get rewarded in Bitcoin.
So they're doing all this work using their computers to secure the network, and that's how new Bitcoins are made.
Exactly. And because it's all distributed, super secure. But, there's that elephant in the room.
The price of Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's been on a roller coaster. Up, down, all over the place.
Makes it hard to know what to do with it sometimes.
Volatility is a challenge, for sure. It all comes down to supply and demand.
And with Bitcoin, the supply is limited, right?
Exactly. Only 21 million Bitcoins will ever exist. That's it. That's all. And that's part of what makes it valuable, some argue.
Like digital gold. They can't just make more of it.
Exactly. It's a hedge against inflation. Governments can print as much money as they want.
Which we've seen a lot of lately.
Right. But with Bitcoin, that's impossible. No one controls the supply.
So in theory, it should hold its value better over time.
That's the idea. But that volatility makes it hard to use for everyday stuff. Who wants to buy coffee if their Bitcoin might be worth less by the time they get their drink?
Good point. But Alden mentioned this Lightning Network. What's that all about?
That's trying to solve that problem. It's like a layer built on top of Bitcoin.
Okay, another layer. Getting complicated.
But elegant. It's for faster, cheaper transactions. Imagine opening a separate payment channel with someone you pay often.
So not every coffee purchase is going through the whole Bitcoin system.
Exactly. These transactions happen off-chain almost instantly. Tiny fees. Makes Bitcoin way more practical.
So it could work for our everyday lives, potentially.
Potentially. It's still early days.
It really is. This has been a fascinating deep dive, but it feels like we're just scratching the surface here.
Right.
So, what's the takeaway for our listeners? Will we all be using Bitcoin someday? Should we buy some?
If only I had a crystal ball. The truth is, no one knows for sure. But Bitcoin, this whole blockchain thing, it's making us rethink money.
It's challenging the way things have always been done.
Forcing us to ask, who controls our money? Maybe we're headed toward a world with multiple currencies, all kinds, all working together or competing. It's going to be interesting, that's for sure.
It really is. And as we saw with those bank runs in Lebanon, understanding this stuff, it's more important than ever. Whether Bitcoin is the future or not, it's a conversation worth having.
100%. It makes you think critically about the systems that shape our world.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of money and Bitcoin. Thanks to all of you for listening. We hope this episode gave you a new perspective on those bills in your wallet.
It maybe got you thinking a bit differently about the future.
Exactly. If you want to go even deeper, check out Lyn Alden's book, Broken Money. It's a fantastic read, and it was the inspiration for today's episode.
Super insightful.
As always, keep those brains switched on, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.